Hello and welcome to my channel. This is my 2006 BMW 320 CD convertible, and it's been off the road for a few years. I bought it as a project. One of the many things that I needed to do was to sort out the a corroded rear brake pipe. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this video. It's going to be a bit of a long one because I'm going to go into some detail with what I'm doing. So feel free to skip ahead to the bit that's relevant to you. I'm going to chapter the video, so make it easy to find each section. So yeah, we'll get into it. Now the first step of any job like this is to obviously jack the car up and make sure it's safely supported on axle stands. So I'm not going to show you how to do that, but yeah, I can show you how it's supported. So I've jacked the car up using the rear diff carrier or subframe. So I think it seems to be the safest sort of central jacking point on the rear of the car. And then supported it using axle stands, and then I usually put at least one wheel underneath. So the main issue I'm tackling today is this rather heavily corroded brake pipe, as we can see. So this is on the rear driver's side. As this is a UK car, I'm going to have to basically replace that with a new section of copper nickel pipe. So I just thought I'd quickly show you the tools that I'm going to be using for this. These are in addition to the standard garage tools like spanners, socket sets, etc. So on the left we've got the pipe bender, the middle tool there, which is the actual flaring tool, and then on the right we've got the pipe cutter as well. Now both the bending tool and the pipe cutter are sort of relatively cheap generic tools you can buy off of Amazon, but the middle one was a little bit more expensive. You can get cheaper ones, but from what I've read online at least, it's better to have a decent quality flaring tool, otherwise you can run into issues. And you know, generally the cheaper tools are just either more difficult to use or they just don't produce a good enough flare. So first step is to actually have a look at the brake pipe and see how far along the corrosion goes. The brake line actually runs from the connection to the rubber hose, then it joins onto this steel brake line and runs sort of up and over the rear axle assembly and above the subframe, above the fuel filler pipe. Depending on where I'm going to connect into, we might need to take that off. Across there, and then it runs above the differential and actually reappears just over there. So I'm going to potentially run the pipe from there, because obviously it's going to be a lot easier access, because I'd kind of like to do it sort of OEM as possible. What I'm going to do is shuffle forwards and see what the pipe looks like as it goes towards the front of the car. Now I'm just sort of using my fingernail to scratch off some of the road grime, and you can actually see the original sort of colour of the pipe, so that kind of gives me some confidence that the pipe's good at this point. I recently found an easy method to stop the brake fluid from leaking out as you're disconnecting the brake pipes, which is to basically press and hold down the brake pedal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of the electric seat. I'm going to wedge a broomstick between the seat backrest and the brake pedal, drive the seat forwards, so that should obviously press the brake pedal down, which apparently will stop the fluid from leaking out. So we'll give that a go and see how well it works. So I've got a broomstick, so my plan is, as I say, just to basically do that and push the seat forward. So got my welding gloves, they're fairly padded, so hopefully that'll do the trick. Okay, so I've got the broom handle wedged just sort of in between the headrest and the top of the seat, with the welding gloves there, and obviously pushing down on the brake pedal. One thing I perhaps should have done before is actually spray some penetrating oil on here. So I've just got some of WD-40's specialist brand of fast release penetrating oil. I know in America, I think you guys have got PB Blaster. We don't seem to have that over here in the UK, so this is the best thing that I could find, and it does seem to work fairly well. So I'm just going to spray some on. Okay, we'll leave that to soak in for a bit. I think we need a 11mm spanner for the top one, and I think the bottom one's a 14 or 15, I can't quite remember. So I've got a selection of spanners here, including the 11mm, which I'm pretty sure is the size of the top one. Let's find out what size the bottom one is. So I think it's a 15. Okay, it's not feeling like a 15, but again, I'm just going to try and get some more of that rust off. So I just generally use a little wire brush So I definitely recommend getting one for your toolkit if you don't already have one. So I'm kind of expecting a bit of a battle with this because of obviously how rusty the pipe is. I imagine the connection as well is going to be quite corroded. So yeah, we're definitely not getting enough purchase for the amount of torque we need to apply. So what I'm going to do is try and break up some of the corrosion that's holding it together using a chisel and a decent sized hammer. I have got a bigger hammer, but I think this one should be enough because I don't want to go too crazy at the moment. So I'm just going to give it a couple of decent taps with the hammer. Okay, we've now got brake fluid leaking out, so I'm just going to grab a little container to try and catch that. So it seems that I either needed to get the brake pedal pushed further down, or maybe that was just a myth. But either way, it was worth a try, and obviously it may still have made a difference at least. Just reduce the amount that comes out. So let's see if we can get the spanner on there now and make any progress. No, it doesn't want to budge, so I'm actually going to try some mole grips as my next option. The trick with these is to get a strong enough grip on them. So you've got to adjust this screw here just to increase the tension. We'll try and get it on the flats of the nut. Okay, that's too tight, so it's a bit of a trial and error sort of thing. Okay, that's nice and secure. And that does not want to budge. So as I'm doing this, I'm starting to think that I might actually need to kind of get a bit drastic, which might end up meaning I need to replace this rubber brake pipe as well, which to be honest does look quite corroded itself, so I think that might be something I need to do anyway. I think I'm going to try the socket idea, so I'm going to use a multi-tool to just cut the brake pipe off kind of flush with the top of the nut there. I'm not sure what else you could use for it. I suppose you could use a hacksaw or something like that. I'm always a fan of if there's an easier option that's going to save you time, then do it basically. Right, so I've got my multi-tool ready. So this is a really handy tool to have. It certainly makes cutting through bolts and things a lot quicker. There we go. So I'll just show you what I've done. So basically I've just cut the brake pipe off so that I can now get a socket onto this nut. So I'll get my little ratchet, make sure it's set to loosen. Now we're going to use a 14mm on the bottom just to stop that from turning as well, because although there's a tab that holds it in place, I don't think that's going to be strong enough, so we will just use the spanner on the bottom. Now I read that it's actually a 14, but that doesn't seem to be the case, so just bear with me one sec. I'll get the right size spanner for that. Okay, so obviously with this it'll definitely be the right size. So I tried a 17 and that wasn't quite big enough, which I think is the biggest size I've got in spanners. So yeah, I'm just going to use an adjustable. If you're going to use an adjustable spanner, I'd recommend using a good quality one. Otherwise you just risk again rounding the nut off and then you just end up with more problems. Right, okay. I'm just gonna see what happens if I just use the ratchet just for a sec. No, it's just gonna slip, that is. So I'm just gonna try a couple more different sizes of socket. Okay, so I've just been giving this a little bit of thought, and I think what I'll probably do is I think I'll just cut this retainer off. So yeah, let's try that. So I think what I might have to do is, if I can, cut in the middle and then kind of split it, and then hopefully then I can just sort of bend it out of the way. So I've got some thin nose mole grips. I should be able to now just kind of rip it apart. Normally you'd reuse this this kind of bracket thing, but obviously in our case, well, it is no more. So now we can pull this through, and yeah, getting a closer look at this thing. I mean, I might just give it a quick wire brush. Just to see what we were dealing with. Obviously, you know, now it's done, but yeah, that's pretty well corroded. I think, I don't think that was going to come off in one piece really. And also I think it's probably wise to change this brake hose. So this is the first bracket that you come to sort of in front of the fuel tank. So the fuel tank's just out of view to the left. So I'm just going to loosen this. Now I don't think I need to fully remove it. It looks like I should be able to kind of manipulate it out of the way like that, and then the brake pipes are just clipped in on the other side. Right, so we should now be able to unclip the brake pipes and see what kind of access we've got to work on them. Right, so that's that. So as far as I can tell, and I'm sort of 99% sure, it's this pipe that I need to cut into and replace. So that's the one I'm going to focus on. I'm not going to be able to get enough access around the whole circumference of the pipe from where it is to make a nice cut. So what I might do is actually cut a little bit further back, you know, just in front of the fuel tank. Then that will allow me to pull this down further, and then I can actually get the pipe cutter on there. Right, so I've mucked about with it a little bit, and I think I'm going to have to sort of hold the pipe steady with one hand and sort of use the tool one-handed. I think it's what we're going to have to do. Okay, we're getting some fluid leaking. Luckily I had my my bowl ready to catch it. Definitely need goggles on here, because obviously you don't want to get this stuff in your eyes. Right, so I've successfully cut through the pipe using the multi-tool. Right, so here's the pipe cutter. I have used one of these before. Well, not one exactly like this, but a different type. But they all work on the same principle. So I'm just going to slide it over the pipe, and then tighten the screw here. Now, because it's a steel pipe, and this pipe cutter said it was for softer pipes, so the copper nickel, you know, those kind of materials, I'm just going to go quite gentle. So I'm not going to tighten this all the way, and I'm just going to start turning it around the pipe. You know, make sure I do a good few revolutions. Then I'm going to perhaps tighten it a little bit more. So I'm literally sort of doing, you know, not even a quarter of a turn, probably an eighth of a turn each time. So I sort of tighten it, turning it until, you know, you can sort of feel the level of resistance when you're turning it. So when that resistance goes, that's when you know you're ready to go to the next level of tightness. Okay, and we're through. So it took a little bit of time, but as I say, I wanted to make sure I did it sort of bit by bit. So let's take a close look at the end. Yeah, so I think I'm quite happy with that. I mean, again, this is the first time I've done any kind of hard brake line work on a car, but it looks like a clean cut. So yeah, I think that should do the trick. So I decided it's probably a good idea to actually have a practice run. So I'm going to just have a go at using this flaring tool on my workbench. I'm just going to carefully straighten the tube slightly. So, and I'm going to probably cut it about there. So that should give enough length to sort of have a play and get used to working with this stuff. Okay, so as this is a softer pipe, I'm kind of probably going to go a little bit tighter on the screw. You know, go up in bigger jumps. You definitely still want to do it in stages though, because otherwise you'll end up kind of squashing and deforming the end, which is not what you want to get a good seal when you come to do the flare. And you also want to keep going until the pipe naturally sort of falls off, because if you go so far and then start wiggling the pipe, there we go, then you can end up causing a little burr on the end. Again, you don't really want to be doing that. So that's the end that was already cut, you know, the cut end of the pipe as it was supplied, and that's the cut I've just done, which I think doesn't look too bad. So I'll move that to one side and we'll have a look at this. So I'm just going to pause for a second and I'll just do a view of the instructions. So I'm just pushing the brake pipe into the tool and securing it in place with the 2 bolts. There's a small opening so that you can see where the end of the pipe is inside the tool. So that's roughly where the pipe should sit. And then there's a positioning bolt which acts as an end stop, which is screwed into the end. So once the positioning bolt's installed, you just push the pipe up to the positioning bolt. I'm just going to make sure the positioning bolt's nice and tight. Holding the pipe securely against the positioning bolt, I'm just going to tighten the 2 clamp bolts. Okay, so that's quite tight now. As you can see, we've got a bit of a smaller gap, I'd say, there. I don't know whether that's supposed to be completely closed out or, well, we'll find out. I'm going to remove the positioning bolt now since the pipe is in place. Just going to apply some grease to the punch before installing it. Next I'm going to install the punch. Firstly screw it in place by hand and then tighten it with a ratchet. Now as we tighten this, it's actually going to push into the end of the pipe and basically create the flare shape. Okay, and that's bottomed out. So now I'm just going to loosen and then remove the punch. Then just loosen the 2 clamp bolts and remove the pipe. So it looks like it has deformed the pipe slightly. I'm not too sure if that's a problem or not. I might just have a little look online and see if that's normal. But the actual flare itself looks, I would say, quite good. Let's clean some of the grease off. I'm quite happy with that. It looks consistent. You know, I'm rotating it and it doesn't look like it's kind of got any weird deformation going on. So yeah, I think that's quite good. Right, so I think for some of the connections I've bought, I need to actually do a double flare. So this is, I believe, what's called a bubble flare. So to do the double, we need to use the other side of the punch. So I'm going to put this back together, and I might actually put a little bit of grease on the outside of the pipe itself, just to lubricate that. So I'm just literally going to smear a little tiny bit on the outside here. I actually took the tool apart just to have a look at how it works on the inside. So it is literally just a smooth sort of hole, essentially, or tube if you like, that's clamping onto the pipe. Put the pipe back in. So I think really it might be best to actually leave the pipe in there if you're going to do the double flare. I'm not too sure what impact it has if you take it out and then put it back in. Hopefully it won't matter. I mean, obviously this is just a test piece, so it really doesn't matter in the end, but obviously it's good to know the best practice when you're doing things like this. Now that's actually tightened up. I think it's more or less bottomed out on the two halves there. There's perhaps a slight gap, but it doesn't feel like I could realistically go any tighter without breaking something. So yeah, let's now use the other end of the die. Sorry, the punch, I keep calling it a die. Which is this end, so that's the, I guess you call it OP2, although it's not actually labelled. So it's this end we're using now. So I'm going to dip that in the grease until it stops, and then use the ratchet spanner. Okay, that's bottomed out now. So I'm going to loosen this. Yeah, and you can see a witness mark there on the tip of the punch, suggesting that it's done its job. And that is the double flare. So essentially it's kind of two stages. So the first stage kind of squashes the end and kind of causes it to bulge out or swage out. And then the second stage kind of pushes the inside back in on itself. And it looks like that is what I need for this type of connector, because I don't know if you can tell, but it's slightly convex in there. There's like a kind of a cone shaped protrusion, which this one's obviously kind of convex, if you like, or pushed inwards. So obviously when the two come together, they should form a nice seal. So slide the ferrule on and then tighten it up, and then it should fit together. Oops. Obviously I've got no way of pressure testing this, so whether it's actually any good or not, I don't know. We'll obviously find that out when I do the real deal on the car. But yeah, I'm going to actually just try tightening this up and fully and just see what happens. So I'm just going to pop it in the vise. Yeah, these fittings are actually brass, so of course they're quite soft. So I guess you want to make sure you don't over tighten it if you use these ones, because as you can see I've actually rounded it slightly, which is not ideal, but I mean I've got 3 others to play with, so it's not the end of the world. So I'm going to take it apart again and just have a look at what the flare looks like now, to see if it looks any different. Well, it doesn't look any more deformed or anything like that, so I think it's probably all good. So that's I'm quite happy with that. So I'm now confident that I know how to use this tool, and confident enough to actually do it on the pipe on the car. So right, so the other tool I've not used before is the tube bender. So all I'm going to do is place the pipe in one of the grooves. So in this case I'm just going to use the smallest one. Then I guess you just kind of pull the handle down and give it a bend like that. And of course we've got a little scale to get it to the angle that you want. I mean that's on 90 degrees there, but I'd say it's probably actually not quite 90, so to get proper 90 degree bend I think we need to go to about there. Perhaps it's actually the edge of this part rather than the notch, so I guess I'll use that as my reference point. But yeah, that seems to work quite nice actually. It's got a nice nice neat bend with no kinks, which is what you want. Just makes life easy. I mean, you can probably bend it by hand fairly easily, but using the tool just helps to, I guess, make sure it bends without kinking, and to get a bit more of a consistent form to the pipe as well. But yeah, it's fairly straightforward. So I think we're ready to start installing the new length of pipe on the car. So yeah, we'll move on to that. Okay, so we're back underneath the car. Here is where the brake pipe actually goes above the fuel filler hose, which is here. So I'm just going to remove these hose clamps, or loosen them at least, so that I can remove this section of the fuel filler pipe. I think I've also got to remove this nut here so I can kind of manipulate this section a bit easier and hopefully get it disconnected from the rubber section there. Well, that wasn't what I had in mind. Okay, so that might not be the best approach. So I've just spilled diesel everywhere. Yeah, most of it's on the floor, not in the container, because I wasn't expecting it. But yeah, essentially there's residual fuel in this part of the pipe, so as soon as you disconnect it and start tilting it down, it starts pouring out. So if you do go down this this route and do that, I would suggest getting a container ready to be able to catch any fuel that drains out, or maybe don't actually disconnect it and work around it instead. Right, so I think I've got the fuel situation under control, so I'm going to carefully disconnect this pipe, the rubber section. I've tilted it down and it seems like nothing's going to come out of there, so I think we're safe now. Okay, that's that section of the filler hose removed. So now we can actually see the brake pipe, which is just here. So that's obviously the old one. As I say, I'm going to try and follow where that goes as best I can with the new one, just because there's already sort of clips and mounting points already there. So a slightly better view of the existing mounting points. As you can see, one's literally right above where the fuel filler pipe runs, and then we've also got another one here. So that's the next thing I'm going to remove, and then hopefully we can start to get some movement out of the old pipe. Right, so I've loosened that and got the pipe out of the bracket. This one, it just sort of unclipped. So the next one is up there, which is going to be a bit awkward. And then hopefully that section of pipe will be kind of ready to come out, because I didn't realise before I started doing this, but actually there is a connection just there. But yeah, so it looks like I could have actually just disconnected it from there, and potentially just replaced that section from there down to the caliper. But you live and learn. Obviously I've already cut the pipe over there, so it's a bit late for that, but there you go. You can learn from my mistake. A bit awkward, this one. Now with these brackets, you don't need to completely remove the nut, so you just kind of turn a few turns just to get it loose, and then you should be able to rotate the metal retaining plate. Okay, so I managed to get it free without removing it completely, which is good. So I just had to keep loosening it, and then it kind of just unhooked. So I think the next place it's mounted looks like this bracket here, which is just kind of next to the fuel tank. I may actually try and see if I can undo the coupling that I showed earlier, just up there. Okay, so I've had to get a bit drastic and cut the pipe because the nut on the end of the pipe was just rounding off. Right, so this now feels completely free, so I'm hoping I can sort of just pull it out now. And there we go, there's the section of the brake pipe that I've just cut out. So I'm hoping to bend the new section to match that, or as near as possible. Okay, so I've got a plan for how I'm going to get the new pipe into the car. So I'm going to feed all the pipe that I've got under there. We're going to straighten it out as I go, and then I'm going to sort of leave probably, I don't know, 1.5 meters hanging out the side of the wheel arch, create the bends I need to do there, and obviously the flare as well, and then sort of try and feed that in underneath the car where it needs to be. So we'll give that a try and see how we get on. Okay, so I've got my length of my coil of pipe. I'm going to sort of straighten it as I go and just feed it under there, and then once I get so far I'll start pulling it through from the other side. So I'm just going to carefully straighten it. What I might do as well actually is just put something over the end of the pipe just to stop any dirt from going inside. Okay, so I've just wrapped some sellotape on the end there. That should do the trick. Now I need to work out where exactly the pipe needs to go. Right, so I'm just going to start feeding this in. So I'm just going sort of above the subframe. I'm not worried too much the fact that I'm going through the spring at the moment, because of course I'm not actually going to be using this section. So what I've decided to do is I've just kind of gone a bit overkill on the length, because I think what will end up happening is I'll end up well, I just won't know what length I need to, at what point I need to start creating these bends. Yeah, so I'm just kind of winging it at this point, because I'm just hoping that that's enough length. I mean, I'd be very surprised if it's not, considering this is the pipe that goes basically from the caliper over to the other side. Using this as a kind of rough judgment, I mean, obviously there's several bends in it, so it's going to be a bit longer than that, but I think that probably should be enough. I'm going to start here at the cut end here and work my way towards the car. So I'm going to actually allow for a little bit more length here, because obviously I need to create the flange on the end, or the flare, and also this is actually I actually cut this off anyway, so the real pipe would be, well, the original pipe should have been slightly longer. It's not quite a 90-degree bend I'm going for, so I'm going to stop about there, see how that compares with the original. Okay, that's quite close actually. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. So the next bend is in a slightly different plane, so it's kind of comes up and along and then bends to the left. So I'm going to do that next, and it's probably, well, it's a very slight bend, to be honest. It's probably only 5 or 10 degrees. So I'm just going to roughly mark the centre of the bend, if you like, and then we want to bend. Which way do we want to bend? That way. So I'm going to put the mark on the 0. Slowly close the tool around it. It's not quite in the right plane, I think. And let's check that. Yeah, I don't know how well you can see that, but I'm quite happy with that so far. It's actually quite close to the original, considering this is the first time I've done this. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So the next is a downward bend. I think it's easier to keep the tool facing upwards because then you can see your markers and it's easier to actually get the pipe into place. So hopefully this section will now look quite similar, new versus old. Some of the sort of sharper bends are a little bit more difficult to form, so they're not quite as well formed. But in general, I'd say it's pretty close. Okay, so we've got something that looks roughly like the original pipe. I think it's probably caught on the wall on the other side of the garage. Yes, on the other side of the car, it's poking through like that. Again, I think, yes, it needs to go in front of the spring. So I'm just going to feed it back. Obviously, I'm not applying too much force. If it gets caught on something, I'm going to stop because I don't want to bend anything. Okay, so we're now coming through in front of the spring, which is the correct side. And I've kind of got it bending off. Oops, that's a pot of brake fluid. Don't want to spill that. So it's now bending off in that direction, so hopefully I can continue feeding it through without too much of an issue. Okay, so on the other side of the car, it's actually almost in the right place now. So I think we just need to manipulate it into place and then perhaps bend a couple of bits slightly. But it's almost there. So unfortunately I have had to manhandle it into position a little bit, which I think has meant that there's a couple of unintentional bends, but I think it's more or less in the right place. So this is the rubber brake hose, which I'm obviously going to be replacing. So that sits there, and of course we want this pipe to connect onto there. Okay, so I've played around with the pipe routing a little bit more, and I think I need to cut it there where I've just marked it. And on the other side of the car, I've actually routed the pipe behind the rear swing arm, because previously I had the pipe sort of coming out here, off over there, but of course I'd then have to sort of bend it to all sorts of weird shapes to get it behind where it needs to go. So I decided to actually feed it back out the other side and then refeed it. So it kind of comes down here now, and underneath the car like that, which is actually more in line with where it needs to go. Okay, so I'm now back underneath the car, and I've kind of got the pipe clipped in place as best I can for now, and it seems to fit reasonably well. But I think, looking at the next clip along, I suspect that needs to move along towards the towards the right of the screen, which is the left-hand side of the car. So I've just loosened this one off slightly, so I'm just going to see if I can slide it over, but it doesn't seem to want to budge at the moment. Okay, so I've had a fiddle around with it, and I think that the pipe is actually in the right place, or roughly, and I think that clamp or retainer clip must actually go at an angle like this, because I can't move the pipe far enough in either direction for it to land either on this straight section or the other straight section. But I mean, as long as it's secure, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to leave it like that. So back on the left hand side of the car, as we can see, this is the original pipe, or what's left of it, and this is the new pipe. So I'm going to try and sort of bend this by hand as best I can, so it kind of roughly follows that path, and then it kind of comes runs under here. So then I'll do this, and then we'll sort of work our way forwards. Okay, so that's kind of where we're up to. I've sort of bent it by hand. It's quite a, you know, quite a gentle curve. Obviously the original pipe's got more sort of defined bends, but I think by hand it's quite difficult to achieve that. So I'm just going to kind of now manipulate it into place around the fuel tank. So I'm just going to pull the pipe out from under the car, because what I'd like to do is actually pass it above the rear bracing here, because what I can do then is kind of follow the edge of the fuel tank and go above this brace, because I don't really want it to come below the brace, because I feel like that leaves it a bit too exposed. Whereas if I go above it, I can sort of tuck it up in there and then almost join back on over there where the original pipe continues. Okay, so I've got it mostly routed into place. I will sort of secure it a bit better than that in a moment, because I mean there's another bracket there, so I can use that. But what I have found, annoyingly, I can't quite get it to pass this gap in front of the fuel tank, because if it wasn't for that, I can more or less put it over the fuel tank without actually kind of taking the fuel tank off. I've just skipped ahead a bit, and I'm now preparing the pipe that's on the car so it's ready to connect to the new section. One key thing to remember here is make sure you put your ferrule on there before you start doing this, otherwise you'll have to cut it off and start again. So I skipped ahead a little bit. I've finished doing the flare on both pipes and connected them together, as you can see. I've also seated the pipe back in the bracket, so everything's nice and secure. And then what I'm going to do is just, I think, cable tie the pipe to this fuel tank strap bracket here, and then probably cable tie it to this reinforcement brace somewhere there. What I'll do is I'll get a bit of fuel line or something, a bit of rubber hose, slit it and slide it over just to stop the pipe from rubbing against it, because I don't obviously don't want to cause a hole and a leak there. It's not quite as neat as a solution as I wanted to do originally, because obviously originally I wanted to try and get it into the original brackets, but I think this is the best I can do with the equipment that I have available. Okay, so what I've done is I've got a piece of silicone tubing, and I've cut it to roughly, well, the length, so it's roughly the width of this reinforcement brace, and then I've cut a slit down its length so that I can slide it over the pipe, the brake pipe, as you can see. And what I'm going to do is just slide it on, and that should just protect the pipe against any damage from it resting against this this brace strut support. So that will sit like that, and that will just provide it a bit of cushioning. And now all I'm going to do, it's not the most elegant solution, but I'm just going to cable tie it in place. So I think that's secure enough. It's you know, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to rattle around, which is the main thing. So I'm just going to trim the excess of the cable tie, and then I think we'll call that done. So what I've done here is I've just made sure that the pipe isn't actually rubbing on anything, so there's a gap between it and the fuel tank, and then tucked it sort of up out of the way of the suspension swing arm, because obviously you don't want the suspension arm to collide with the pipe, because that certainly wouldn't be good. And yeah, just making sure it's kind of well out of the way of anything that's going to rub against it and damage it. And then obviously it sits nicely in the original clip there. I think what I might do, because I'm actually using a different hole since the original pipe is actually still in there, I'll just do what I've done with the bit of silicone tubing, just to kind of give it a bit of cushioning within the clip there. Yeah, so here all I've done is just, as I say, slid a piece of silicone tubing over the brake pipe, just to kind of pack out that bracket, because before obviously it was a loose fit. So now the silicone's holding it nice and snug in the bracket, and it's not going to rattle around anymore. Okay, so unfortunately I've had to sort of skip ahead a little bit and do some bits off of camera, mainly partly to try and figure things out, and also because I actually ran out of storage on my phone. So obviously this is my first YouTube video of this type, so you have to bear with me on that. So I've just formed the flare on the caliper end of the brake pipe, so I've already shown it on the bench, and it's exactly the same process. Key thing here is to remember to put the ferrule on, because of course I think, as I mentioned when I did the other end, if you forget to put the ferrule on, you'll have to cut it off and start again, and obviously if you've not got the length to play with, you could be a bit of an issue. And then we remove our pipe, or remove the tool from the pipe, and as you can see, I'll just get a close up of that. We've got a nice bubble flare on the end, so that will now connect into the new brake hose, which I've got here. So that's the next part of the process, is to replace the old hose, which is, as you can see, very corroded. So first things first, I'm going to just remove it from the bracket there, and it's secured, I think somewhere, yeah, just there. There's another bracket behind the suspension swing arm, which is difficult to see from this angle. But it's basically retained there, and that bracket's looking nice and rusty as well. Hopefully it doesn't fall apart when I try and take the hose out. So this is being a bit awkward, I think mainly because of how rusty it is, but essentially I think we need to kind of pry that clip off in that direction. So I'm just using a flathead screwdriver to try and break it loose at least. Sounds a little bit promising. I think I'm going to get a closer look in there and get you back on once I've removed it, and I'll obviously explain how I've done it. Okay, so what I've decided to do is to avoid damaging this bracket. I mean, it looks like I may have no choice in the end, but I'm going to try taking the bracket off, taking the whole brake pipe with the bracket onto the bench, and see if I can persuade this the pipe out of the bracket. Okay, so now we can get a bit of a better look at how the bracket, or how the pipe is retained in the bracket. So essentially, this retainer needs to slide out. So I'm going to mount it in the vise, so that's quite secure now. What I'm going to do is spray some WD-40, which is like a kind of penetrating oil. It's not technically penetrating oil, but it does a good job sometimes of freeing things up. What I might do as well is actually work the retainer in and out. So essentially tap it back in and then sort of bring it back out again. Okay, looks like it's just freed up completely, so that's good. Yes. Okay, so as it happens, the pipe actually goes down through the bracket and then can come out. So I'm going to give this a clean up with probably the wire brush, and put it all back together with the new pipe. It's not perfect, but I think that's clean enough now to go back together. Let's just see how well it slides in and out of there. Very easy it seems. So I think it's actually a combination of the groove in the little sort of collar on the brake hose. I think that kind of engages with this part of the retainer. You can just sort of see there's an impression there. So I think it must sit in that impression and sort of lock it in place. So I'm just going to test that out before I put it on the car. So that obviously fits together like that, and then this should slide in. And yeah, I'm quite sure that if I was to push that in, it's going to sort of lock itself in place. So I'll do that once it's on the car, but I think I'm confident that I know how it fits together. Okay, so I think we're ready to install the new brake pipe. So I'm going to feed it through sort of on the outside of the shock absorber underneath the drive shaft, and obviously positioning it ready for the bracket there. But first, actually, we need to screw it into the caliper. So I'll just do that now, which might be easier if I put it through there. So we can just tighten that up with the 14mm spanner. Okay, and now feed this back through into the bracket.
Oops. I want to try and avoid getting dirt in there, but we're going to bleed it anyway, so I'm sure any dirt should be flushed out. Now I think we'll get our retainer in place, which I think goes that way. Yeah, that seems to be secure. It slid in quite easily actually, to the point where I thought maybe it wasn't actually seated properly, but I'm pulling on the hose and it's not coming out, so I'm happy with that. So now we can connect the new metal brake pipe to the hose. Right, so I've connected the metal pipe to the rubber hose just to make sure everything fits. I had to pause for a couple of days because I'd forgotten that I had to kind of rip the brake hose retaining clip off. So I'm now just going to disconnect this and feed the brake hose up through the bracket. It should locate. There's a little, so we can now manipulate this into place and hopefully get the threads to engage and tighten it up. Right, I think that's nice and secure now. So that is that end done. So what I'll do now is go underneath the car and just make sure everything's tight under there, and then I think we're ready to bleed it, which is essentially the last step before we can put the wheels back on and get the car back on the ground. Right, so the brake pipe is now fully secure. So I've secured it there on the fuel tank strap bracket with a cable tie, and as I say, just a little bit of rubber tubing or silicone tubing. Again on the reinforcement brace, obviously this being a convertible, it has this part here. I think the other, a saloon or a coupe or a touring wouldn't have this. And then I've routed it up next to the fuel tank and kind of inboard of the rear suspension swing arm, and then it sort of then joins into this bracket here again with some silicone tubing to just pad it out a little bit because it was a loose fit inside that bracket. So that's holding it nice and secure. Then it comes up and then sort of runs roughly along the factory routing from there onwards across the width of the car to the other side. So you can just about see it. This is still on the passenger side, so that's the passenger side wheel hub, drive shaft, and then you can see the pipe there. You can see the remnants of the old pipe where I've had to cut it. Then it runs above the subframe in that bracket there, and then into that bracket above the fuel filler hose, and then around the driver's side suspension spring top seat, and can't quite see it from here, so I'll just move around the other side, and then you can see that bracket there again, and above the fuel filler hose, which is that sort of pipe there with the Jubilee clips on it, around the top spring seat, and then into the rubber brake hose. Okay, so that's the brake pipe replaced, and the car's now successfully passed its MOT, which is the safety sort of test for cars in the UK. So yeah, it confirms that the work that I've done is up to the standard required for a car to be on the road in the UK. So that's good news. And yeah, so thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you found it useful or interesting, please subscribe or like the video, and I'll be making more videos on fixing things, not just cars. So yeah, if you like fixing stuff or have an interest in that, then feel free to subscribe, and you'll more than likely see more on this channel that you'll find interesting. So yeah, thanks for watching.